And this is where we can actually see the impact of what we're doing. Check this out. I was just sent this. Shout out to Hines, sent me this before the show. I wasn't actually planning on covering it. I didn't know about it till he just sent it to me. So check this out. So this is an article you can find on NBC News, .com. Influencers and popular podcasts fuel election disinformation among Black voters. Now, I'm not really, as far as election disinformation, that's not why I'm bringing this article up. Right? I'm bringing this article up because it actually does highlight something that they may not have intended for us to look at, but it's happening nonetheless. And that's the reach and impact that individual people on podcasts are starting to have. They're starting to threaten, and this has been the case. I shouldn't say starting to. This has definitely been happening, especially since the pandemic. They're threatening the larger corporations that have had a stranglehold on media for generations. Right? Podcasters in their homes making their own videos. Now, this particular article does mention, it focuses on six different broadcasts, and it does mention the Black Manosphere at one point. But it's getting things incorrect. So you can see here where it kind of mentions the Black Manosphere. I'll go into that in a second. One thing I did want to highlight in these two paragraphs here. So Onyx Impact is, I guess, an organization that was kind of assessing the impact that the internet is having on these election issues. And it says, Onyx Impact found that those 6 sources, now the 6 sources they're talking about, shout out to Greg for the Cash App, appreciate that, Gregory. The 6 sources they're talking about, though, are Candace Owens, Fresh and Fit, The Breakfast Club, Foundational Black Americans, which I assume has referred directly to Tariq Nasheed, but I'm not sure if there's another channel that's mainly based or using that name. Riza Islam and what they call Africa Stream. Right? Those are the 6 different, broadcasters they're specifically talking about. And it said those 6 sources alone collectively have a potential reach of nearly 41 million Americans, adding that each represents spaces where skepticism, anti-Black rhetoric, and deception of truth run rampant. For context, that figure is equivalent to nearly every Black person in America, according to the latest census data. Over 4 months, a team of researchers for Onyx Impact identified 2,500 online accounts creating, sharing, or amplifying disinformation. This is how they're framing it, disinformation. Researchers also held 7 national focus groups of Black audiences to understand how those narratives were showing up in offline spaces. The point of the effort was to gauge the impact of the information, said the founder of Onyx Impact, Asosa Osa, an alumnus of the voting rights group Fair Fight. So it's primarily focused on those 6, but the larger, and they did mention 2,500 others, but they're talking about the encroaching impact that the internet is having on the popular narrative, the narrative that people get to ingest. Because prior to the rise of social media, especially to the rise of the internet, you had to depend on established networks, TV, newspapers. That's where you got your information from, magazines, radio. And, everyday people did not have any influence over that. Now, are there people that, I disagree with that, whatever, we all have that regardless. We have that with the institutions in question, the media corporations in question. But it also means that there are people that are dropping information that, mainstream establishment is not interested in having, right? So this particular article is interesting. I disagree with it in terms of how it couches us and misviews, particularly the Black Manosphere. Because first of all, the only group that they refer to as Black Manosphere is Fresh and Fit. And Fresh and Fit is not Black Manosphere. At the end of the day, they're not making content for Black men. They're Manosphere. So there's kind of a misframing going on with some of this, a lot of it. But you can see how it's being used. And at the same time, you can also see that people like us who are having these conversations online, independent of institutions that want to control the conversation, are starting to have a larger impact than we possibly even think we're having. I kind of wanted to make sure we kind of looked at that as we have these continuing conversations, because even what I just said about considering slavery as an anti-Black misandric enterprise, it's not common knowledge. That's not something that people have argued on a regular basis. Like I said, after I was in school from 92 to 2008. I never once heard anybody openly say in class, either be a lecture or in a text we read, at the end, that slavery in and of itself was majority male. You could assume it, but having someone talk about it, no. Right? So there are topics that we're allowed to talk about and others that we're socially shamed for talking about. I just want to make sure that we start to understand that a lot of us are starting to have impact. Now, contrary to the way they're trying to misframe and mischaracterize all of this, we don't all have the same, it's not one outlook. Everybody online, let alone in the manosphere or the Black manosphere, is not, there's not one argument. There's not a consolidated perspective on things. There's a lot of disagreement within the various aspects of the online community, the manospheres, well, social media, however you want to frame it. There are levels and levels of disagreement, some of it more intense than others, but it doesn't mean that, it's not there. And that means there are a lot of different opinions and perspectives, right? So to label that or even infer that they're just disinformation or something of that nature, and you're guilty by association or whatever, all of these kind of things are done to defer from what we're actually talking about, so people don't have to actually listen and deal with what you're saying, especially if you're putting down documented, evidenced arguments. If they believe that you're producing disinformation before you even get out the gate, they don't got to hear you. So those are some of the things kind of happening with that. So I wanted to share that. Shout out to Hines, as I said, for sharing that particular clip, that particular article. I think it's important.